Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. These stories are told slowly and calmly, intended for nighttime listening. If disturbing material affects you, this is a good moment to stop. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow naturally. Let the quiet stretch out around you. And as you listen, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy true crime stories for sleep like this one, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place associated with familiarity and routine, a small, independently owned roadside motel located just off a long highway stretch. It wasn't the kind of place people stayed for vacations. It was used by truck drivers, traveling workers, and people passing through who needed a cheap room for the night. The sign flickered. The parking lot was usually half full. Nothing about it stood out. The motel had been there for decades, changing owners several times. Locals barely noticed it anymore. It existed quietly, serving a steady stream of strangers who arrived late, slept, and left early. For years, there were no complaints. No police calls. No incidents beyond the occasional noise dispute. That's why no one noticed when certain guests never checked out. At first, it was dismissed as poor record keeping. Some guests paid in cash. Some left before morning. The front desk was often staffed by a single person overnight, sometimes falling asleep during slow hours. Missing paperwork wasn't unusual. Then a woman's family began searching for her. She had been driving cross-country to visit relatives and stopped for the night at the motel. Her car was found parked outside her room days later. The room had been cleaned. Her belongings were gone. The staff insisted she had checked out. Police initially believed she left voluntarily, but months later, another missing person was linked to the same motel. Then another. All travelers. All passing through. All last seen checking in late at night. Investigators reviewed old registration cards and surveillance footage. The cameras were outdated and covered only the front desk and parking lot. Footage showed guests arriving, receiving keys, and heading to their rooms. What stood out was how often the same employee appeared in the background. He worked the night shift regularly. He was described as quiet, polite, and efficient. Guests barely remembered him. He never caused issues. He was the kind of person people assumed was harmless because he seemed bored more than anything else. As detectives reviewed footage more closely, patterns emerged. Certain guests were assigned rooms in the same area of the motel, always at the far end, always away from the main office, always when the employee was alone on shift. Former guests were interviewed. Some remembered odd moments. A knock on the door late at night offering extra towels. Someone asking if everything was okay. Someone lingering in the hallway longer than necessary. Each moment seemed harmless on its own. One former guest described waking up to the sound of someone standing outside her door, not knocking, just standing there. When she turned on the light, the footsteps walked away. She never reported it. A breakthrough came when a contractor working on plumbing renovations found something hidden behind a removable wall panel in an unused room. Inside were personal items, phones, wallets, jewelry, identification cards. Items belonging to people reported missing. Police searched additional rooms and uncovered more concealed spaces. Some were accessible only to staff. Others required knowledge of the building's aging layout. It became clear that whoever was responsible understood the motel intimately. The night employee was questioned again. This time, inconsistencies appeared. His explanation for guest movements changed. His timelines didn't align with camera footage. When his residence was searched, investigators found detailed notes, room numbers, guest descriptions, dates, and times. Certain entries were marked with symbols. Others were crossed out. He admitted that the motel was ideal. Guests were anonymous. They were tired. They were far from home. No one expected danger in a place meant only for sleep. He relied on isolation, not force. On trust, not chaos. What disturbed investigators most was how long it went unnoticed. Because the victims were travelers, no single community noticed a pattern. Each disappearance happened far from home, scattered across jurisdictions. After the case became public, the motel shut down permanently. The building still stands, abandoned, its sign dark. Locals avoid it. Travelers pass without knowing what once happened inside. This story is disturbing because it unfolded in a place designed for rest. A place where people lower their guard because they believe the night will pass quietly. It didn't rely on sudden violence or obvious threat. It relied on anonymity, routine, and the belief that nothing bad happens in ordinary places. True crime reminds us that awareness doesn't mean fear. It means noticing patterns, listening to discomfort, and remembering that danger often hides behind familiarity. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness accounts. These stories are told slowly and calmly, meant for late-night listening. If disturbing material affects you, it's okay to stop here. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the room grow quiet around you. And as you listen, let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read them all. If you enjoy long-form true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place most people associate with waiting, a 24-hour laundromat tucked between apartment buildings on a dimly lit street. It wasn't new or modern. The lights buzzed softly. The machines rattled and hummed at all hours. For many residents, it was one of the few places open late at night, a neutral space where strangers sat quietly and minded their own business. For years, nothing seemed wrong. People came in alone, especially late at night, when it was easier to find open machines. The owner lived out of state and relied on security cameras and occasional maintenance visits. There was no staff on site overnight, but nothing serious had ever happened. The first incident barely registered. A woman told a friend that someone had watched her the entire time she waited for her clothes to dry. She said the man never touched her or spoke, just sat a few machines away, unmoving. When she left early, he didn't follow. She assumed she was just tired. Months later, another late-night customer described something similar. A man sitting inside the laundromat long after his clothes should have finished. No laundry. No phone. Just watching. The story was unsettling, but again, nothing actually happened. Then a regular customer didn't come home. He was a man in his early 30s who worked overnight shifts and did his laundry around 2 in the morning on his nights off. When his roommate reported him missing, police found his basket still inside the laundromat. His clothes were folded neatly on a table. His phone and keys were gone. At first, investigators considered the possibility that he left with someone he knew. But weeks later, another customer vanished under similar circumstances. Same time window. Same location. Laundry left behind. No signs of a struggle. Police reviewed security footage from inside the laundromat. The cameras were old and grainy, but they showed enough to raise concern. In both cases, the missing individuals were visible folding clothes when another man entered the frame. He sat down without using a machine. He watched quietly. In the footage, he never approached quickly. He waited. Sometimes he stood up and walked slowly to a vending machine or restroom, always returning to the same seat. He stayed just long enough to become part of the background. As detectives reviewed months of footage, they noticed the same man appearing repeatedly during overnight hours. Sometimes he stayed for minutes. Sometimes for hours. He never washed anything. He always left shortly after certain customers. Former patrons were interviewed. Many remembered him vaguely. A man who was always there. Someone who felt out of place but not threatening enough to draw attention. A few recalled leaving early because they felt uncomfortable but couldn't explain why. One woman described a moment that stood out. She said the man asked her what time the last bus ran. When she answered, he nodded and went silent. Minutes later, he asked if she lived nearby. She lied and said someone was picking her up. He left soon after. A breakthrough came when a nearby convenience store reported suspicious activity. An employee recognized the man from a police bulletin and remembered seeing him late at night, sometimes watching people walk toward the laundromat. He never entered the store. He just stood outside, observing. Police identified him as a maintenance contractor who had previously serviced the laundromat machines. He knew the layout. He knew which cameras worked poorly. He knew that the back door sometimes failed to latch properly. A search of his residence revealed notebooks filled with observations, dates, times, descriptions of customers, notes about who came alone, who stayed the longest, and who arrived on foot. Certain entries were marked with symbols. Others were crossed out. Investigators also found personal items belonging to multiple missing individuals. Headphones, wallets, bus passes, items with no real value, but deeply personal. They were cleaned and stored carefully. During questioning, he admitted that laundromats were ideal. People waited. They were distracted. They expected strangers. No one questioned why someone sat quietly in the corner. He relied on the hum of machines and the assumption that help was nearby, even when it wasn't. He explained that he never forced conversations. He let others speak first. He waited for moments when someone stepped outside to take a call or check the time. He knew which nearby streets were poorly lit and which alleys were rarely used. What disturbed investigators most was how much time he spent observing without acting. Sometimes weeks passed between incidents. He was patient, methodical, invisible. After his arrest, more people came forward. Some remembered being followed partway home. Others recalled seeing him sitting in the laundromat late into the night with nothing to wash. At the time, they assumed he was just another insomniac passing time. The laundromat closed temporarily after the case became public. When it reopened, changes were made. Brighter lighting, clearer cameras, emergency call buttons, overnight attendance. But for many residents, the space never felt neutral again. This story is disturbing because it took place in a location built for waiting. A place where people sit quietly, surrounded by strangers, trusting that nothing will happen because nothing ever has. It didn't rely on sudden violence or chaos. It relied on patience, familiarity, and the human tendency to ignore discomfort when it doesn't come with a clear threat. True crime reminds us that danger often hides in routine, in places we visit without thinking, in moments when we assume being surrounded by others means we are safe. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told slowly, calmly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness accounts. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow. Let the noise of the day fade into the background. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place people rarely think twice about, a public library. It was a large, modern building with quiet reading rooms, computer stations, and long rows of shelves. Students, retirees, and families passed through every day. People came to feel safe, anonymous, and undisturbed. For years, nothing seemed out of place. Then a woman who visited the library several times a week stopped coming. Staff assumed she had changed her routine. A few months later, another regular patron vanished. Then another. None of them were connected. Different ages, different backgrounds, different lives. The connection wasn't discovered until a librarian mentioned something odd during a routine meeting. She said she often saw the same man assisting people in the back areas of the building. He didn't work there, but he always appeared to be helping, guiding patrons to shelves, assisting with printers, offering directions. He blended in so well that no one questioned him. Security footage revealed the man entering the building almost daily. He stayed for hours. He never checked out books. He spent most of his time observing, watching who arrived alone, who stayed late, who used secluded study rooms or corners far from staff desks. When police reviewed footage from the days the missing patrons were last seen, they noticed the same pattern. The man would follow at a distance. He never rushed. He waited for moments when people stood up, gathered their things, and walked toward exits or restrooms. He always kept enough distance to appear coincidental. Investigators later learned that several patrons had reported uncomfortable interactions over the years. Someone standing too close. Someone asking personal questions. Someone offering help that felt unnecessary. Each complaint had been dismissed as harmless or misunderstood. A break in the case came when a college student trusted her instincts. She noticed the same man appearing near her every time she visited the library. Different clothes. Same posture. Same calm stare. One evening, she left abruptly and reported the behavior. Her description matched the person seen in footage tied to multiple disappearances. Police identified him as a former security contractor who had worked in public buildings years earlier. He knew layouts, blind spots, exit routes. He knew how to move through spaces without drawing attention. He had no official access anymore, but he didn't need it. A search of a storage unit connected to him revealed personal items belonging to multiple missing individuals. Library cards, notebooks, bags, items taken not for value, but as confirmation. He had documented dates, times, and locations in careful handwriting. As the investigation expanded, detectives discovered that some victims had been followed beyond the library. He learned routines. Which bus they took, which direction they walked. He preferred places where people felt invisible but secure, where no one questioned quiet behavior. Another disturbing detail emerged from interviews with witnesses. Several people recalled seeing the man reading quietly in the same spot for hours, never turning a page. He wasn't there to read. He was there to watch. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this story is how many chances there were to stop it earlier. Small discomforts ignored. Patterns overlooked. Familiarity mistaken for safety. The library remained open and welcoming, even as something dark passed silently through it. These crimes didn't happen in abandoned places or dangerous neighborhoods. They happened in a public space meant for peace and learning. A place where silence was expected and attention was low. True crime reminds us that danger doesn't always interrupt. Sometimes it blends in. Sometimes it sits quietly nearby, waiting for routine to do the work for it. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told calmly, slowly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves come from documented investigations, court records, and witness statements. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, settle in. Let your breathing slow. Let the tension of the day fade away. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you find yourself coming back for these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a town built around convenience. Everything people needed was close by: shops, schools, offices, and walking paths that connected neighborhoods like quiet arteries. People felt safe here. Familiar faces passed each other every day. That sense of familiarity was exactly what allowed something dark to exist unnoticed for so long. The first warning sign came in the form of a complaint that went nowhere. A woman reported that someone had been inside her house while she was away. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But she was certain something had changed. A chair was angled differently. A cupboard door was left slightly open. Police told her it was likely stress or forgetfulness. Weeks later, another resident reported something similar. Then another. Each time, officers found no signs of forced entry. Doors and windows were intact. No alarms were triggered. The reports were logged and quietly dismissed. Then someone went missing. The victim was a man in his early 40s who lived alone and worked predictable hours. He was last seen walking home from a grocery store less than a mile from his house. His groceries were later found in his kitchen, partially unpacked. The front door was locked. His phone and wallet were gone. There was no evidence of a struggle. Police initially believed he had left voluntarily, but friends insisted that didn't make sense. He had plans. He had responsibilities. He wouldn't just disappear. 2 months later, a woman living alone vanished under nearly identical circumstances. This time, investigators paid closer attention. Her home also showed subtle signs of disturbance. Nothing obvious, just small inconsistencies. A window unlatched. A light left on in a room she never used. As detectives dug deeper, they noticed that all reported incidents and disappearances occurred within a specific area connected by pedestrian paths and service alleys. These paths were rarely monitored and used mostly by locals who felt comfortable walking them at all hours. Attention turned to a man who worked as a delivery and maintenance contractor in the area. He was known by many residents, often seen carrying tools or packages. He had access codes, keys, and a reason to be present in and around homes. People trusted him because he looked like he belonged. When police searched his vehicle, they found notebooks filled with dates, addresses, and observations. Notes like alone, returns late, and no visitors. Some entries were marked complete. Others were circled. A search of a rented storage unit revealed personal belongings from multiple missing people. Shoes, bags, identification cards. Items that held no monetary value but deep personal significance. Everything was carefully organized. Investigators soon realized the reports of someone being inside homes without stealing anything were part of the same pattern. He had been entering houses just to observe, to learn routines, to test access points. Sometimes he stayed only minutes, other times, hours. He moved silently, carefully, leaving as little evidence as possible. Another disturbing detail emerged when police reviewed years of overlooked security footage. In several cases, a figure could be seen walking behind residents on the paths late at night, always keeping distance, always slowing or stopping when they did. He followed patterns, not people, waiting for the moment when predictability made intervention easy. A separate case uncovered during the investigation involved a woman who had narrowly avoided becoming a victim. She returned home unexpectedly one afternoon and found her bathroom light on. She was certain she had turned it off. As she stood in the hallway, she heard a soft sound, like fabric brushing against the wall. She left immediately and called police. The intruder escaped through a back door. Her report helped investigators narrow their timeline. As more evidence came to light, authorities realized the crimes extended beyond the town. Similar disappearances had occurred in neighboring areas with the same pedestrian infrastructure, the same kind of access, the same sense of safety. During interrogation, the man admitted that he preferred places where people felt comfortable, where they moved without thinking. He said routines made everything easier. He didn't rush. He waited. He relied on people dismissing small signs because acknowledging them felt inconvenient or embarrassing. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the case was how many people had interacted with him. He had been inside dozens of homes. He had been trusted, welcomed, thanked. His presence had never raised alarms because it matched expectations. In the aftermath, residents struggled with a new awareness. They questioned memories, sounds they had ignored, moments they had brushed aside. The town installed new lighting, new cameras, new locks. But what changed most was how people listened to their instincts. This story, like so many others in true crime, is not just about what happened, but about how it was allowed to happen. About how familiarity can become a blind spot. About how danger doesn't always force its way in. It often waits to be invited through assumption and routine. True crime reminds us that awareness is not fear. It's attention. It's listening to small discomforts before they become something larger. It's understanding that safety is not guaranteed by familiarity alone. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told calmly, slowly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names, locations, and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves are drawn from documented investigations, court records, and witness testimony. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow and your body relax. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a place designed for short stays. A roadside motel just off a major highway. The kind of place people stop at without thinking, travelers passing through, truck drivers resting for the night, families breaking up long drives. Rooms turned over quickly. Guests came and went, often without learning each other's names. For years, nothing unusual was reported. Then a woman failed to arrive at her destination. She had checked into the motel late at night and sent a message saying she was tired and would continue driving in the morning. That message was the last anyone heard from her. When police contacted the motel, staff said she had checked out early. There was no reason to question it. Months later, another guest vanished after staying at the same motel. Then another. Each case occurred weeks or months apart, in different seasons, involving people from different places. The disappearances were handled by different jurisdictions, and no one initially connected them. The first clue came from an employee who had worked at the motel for several years. He mentioned that a certain room was requested unusually often, even when other rooms were available. Guests staying in that room frequently checked out early or left belongings behind. Sometimes, staff would find personal items in the trash that didn't seem like things people would willingly discard. Investigators reviewed booking records and noticed a pattern. The same employee was often working the desk when those guests checked in. He was described by co-workers as quiet, reliable, and helpful. Guests trusted him because he handled everything calmly and efficiently. He knew which travelers were alone, which rooms were isolated, and which security cameras didn't work properly. When police reviewed old surveillance footage, they noticed something unsettling. On several nights tied to disappearances, the employee could be seen walking toward guest rooms long after his shift ended. Sometimes he carried linens. Sometimes nothing at all. The footage was grainy, incomplete, and often overwritten before it could be reviewed in detail. A search of the motel uncovered a hidden maintenance corridor behind several rooms. It allowed access without passing through public areas. Inside one of the storage spaces connected to the corridor, investigators found items belonging to missing guests. Phones, identification cards, clothing. Each item had been cleaned carefully. As the investigation widened, police discovered similar cases connected to other motels along the same highway. In each instance, the suspect had worked temporarily or filled in for short periods. He moved frequently, staying just long enough to learn routines and vulnerabilities before relocating. Because motels are designed for anonymity, his presence never stood out. Another disturbing detail emerged when detectives interviewed survivors. A man recalled waking briefly in the night to someone standing near the door, assuming it was staff responding to a noise complaint. A woman remembered being offered help carrying luggage to her room, then feeling uncomfortable when the employee lingered too long. At the time, neither thought it was worth reporting. The suspect's method relied on exhaustion and trust. Travelers were tired, disoriented, far from home. They didn't question authority in a uniform. They didn't want trouble. He counted on that hesitation. In one narrowly avoided case, a guest became suspicious after noticing the employee outside her room more than once. She locked the door and placed a chair against it. In the morning, she found scratch marks near the lock. Her report helped confirm the timeline investigators were building. When the suspect was finally arrested, authorities uncovered journals documenting years of movement. Highway exits, motel names, room numbers, notes about which properties had blind spots or minimal staffing overnight. He didn't view his actions as impulsive. He described them as planned, deliberate, and quiet. Perhaps the most unsettling part of this story is how invisible it all was. Motels are transitional spaces. People don't linger. Staff turnover is high. Guests rarely speak to one another. It was the perfect environment for something terrible to hide in plain sight. These crimes didn't occur in places people consider dangerous. They happened in ordinary rooms with locked doors and flickering lamps. Places meant to feel temporary and safe. The danger wasn't loud. It didn't rush. It waited patiently in routine and anonymity. True crime often shows us that safety is not guaranteed by familiarity or convenience. That trust, when combined with exhaustion and isolation, can be exploited. And that listening to discomfort, even when it feels inconvenient, can matter. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told calmly, slowly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware.
Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names and identifying details have been changed, but the events themselves are true and drawn from documented investigations. This is meant to be listened to slowly and calmly. If this type of content is not for you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let the outside world fade for a while. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a small city where public transportation was the backbone of daily life. Thousands of people rode the same buses and trains every day, often recognizing faces without ever learning names. One of those familiar faces belonged to a man who had been driving a late-night bus route for years. He was known as quiet, reliable, and punctual. Riders trusted him without thinking twice. The first disappearance connected to this story involved a young woman who worked evenings. She was last seen boarding the bus just after midnight. Security cameras showed her stepping on, scanning her pass, and taking a seat near the back. She never exited at her stop. Her phone last pinged near the bus depot, then went silent. At the time, police believed she may have left voluntarily. Months later, another rider vanished. Then another. Each disappearance occurred late at night, always on the same route, always when the bus was nearly empty. Because public transportation footage is often overwritten quickly, crucial evidence was lost before anyone realized there was a pattern. The connection finally emerged when a transit supervisor noticed irregularities in the vehicle logs. The bus in question showed unexplained delays, short gaps where the GPS signal dropped, always in the same industrial area near the edge of the city. When confronted, the driver blamed technical issues. No one questioned him further. A breakthrough came when a passenger narrowly escaped. A man riding the bus noticed the driver pulling off route and slowing near an abandoned lot. Sensing something was wrong, he exited the bus early and reported the incident. Investigators reviewed what little footage remained and identified the driver as the common link. A search of a nearby warehouse revealed personal items belonging to multiple missing passengers. Bags, jackets, identification cards. Everything was stored carefully. Investigators realized the driver used his position to isolate victims, choosing times when no one would notice a missing rider. Another case tied to this investigation involved a woman who reported being followed after exiting the same bus line weeks earlier. She described a man in a transit uniform who walked behind her for several blocks before turning away. At the time, she hadn't thought much of it. In hindsight, it became chilling. As the investigation deepened, detectives uncovered complaints that had been dismissed for years. Riders had reported feeling uncomfortable, noticing the bus doors remained closed longer than necessary, or that the driver watched them through the mirror. Each report alone seemed insignificant. Together, they painted a disturbing picture. Perhaps the most unsettling detail came from the driver's routine. He minimized passenger habits. Who rode alone, who fell asleep, who wore headphones and wouldn't hear the doors open. He relied on exhaustion and trust. In another city connected to this case, police uncovered a similar pattern involving a train attendant who had access to restricted areas and maintenance tunnels. Although the crimes were never proven to be linked, investigators noted the same theme: authority, familiarity, and access. What makes this story disturbing is how ordinary it all seemed. Public transportation is something millions rely on every day. It's routine, predictable, and that predictability was used against unsuspecting people. True crime often shows us that danger doesn't look like a threat. Sometimes it looks like a uniform, a schedule, a service we depend on. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told quietly and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay safe. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names and identifying details have been changed, but the events themselves are drawn from documented investigations and court records. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let the room grow still. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. If you come back often for these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins with a place people rarely think about after leaving it, a parking garage. The kind attached to offices, hospitals, and shopping centers. Bright during the day, empty and echoing at night. In one mid-sized city, a series of disappearances began quietly, spaced far enough apart that no immediate connection was made. The first person vanished after finishing a late shift at a medical office. Security footage showed her walking into the garage, keys in hand, phone pressed to her ear. She never reached her car. Her vehicle remained parked where she'd left it. Police initially believed she may have met someone she knew. Months later, a college student disappeared under similar circumstances. Then a retail worker. Then an older man who volunteered at a community center. Different ages. Different backgrounds. The only shared detail was where they were last seen. The parking garage sat between several buildings and was used by hundreds of people each day. It had security cameras, but many of them hadn't worked properly in years. Lighting was inconsistent. Blind spots were common. People moved through it quickly, heads down, focused on leaving. A breakthrough came when a woman reported something unsettling. While walking to her car late one evening, she noticed a man standing between two vehicles, pretending to be on his phone. As she passed, he followed closely behind her. When she turned suddenly, he stopped. She ran back toward the elevator and called security. The man disappeared into the stairwell. Investigators reviewed footage and noticed the same man appeared in all the recordings near the times other victims had vanished. He wore different clothes each time. Sometimes a reflective vest. Sometimes a jacket with a company logo. He looked like he belonged there. After weeks of surveillance, police identified him as a contract worker who performed overnight maintenance in multiple garages across the city. He had keys, access codes, a reason to be present at all hours. Co-workers described him as quiet and dependable. When his residence was searched, investigators found items belonging to multiple missing people. Keys, wallets, identification cards, carefully stored. He had kept notes about which garages had cameras that worked, which stairwells were rarely used, and which days were busiest. Another disturbing detail emerged when police reviewed years of ignored reports. People had complained about feeling watched, about someone standing too close in elevators, about footsteps behind them in empty garages. Each report had been dismissed as coincidence or anxiety. In a separate but eerily similar case uncovered during the investigation, police learned of a man who worked as a night janitor in office buildings. Employees had reported finding desks disturbed, chairs moved slightly, personal items missing and later returned. When he was arrested, he admitted to entering offices after hours and watching people through interior windows before eventually escalating his behavior. He had gone unnoticed for years because he was expected to be there. Another connected case involved a hotel where guests began reporting strange encounters. Someone knocking softly on doors late at night, claiming to be staff. A man in a uniform would ask to check a thermostat or smoke detector. Most guests refused. Some didn't. When a missing person case was tied back to the hotel, investigators realized the uniforms had been stolen and reused to gain access. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of these cases is how ordinary the environments were. Parking garages, offices, hotels, places people passed through without thinking, places designed for convenience, not safety. One survivor later told investigators that what saved her was hesitation. She felt uncomfortable and slowed down instead of rushing to her car. That pause made the man lose interest. He relied on momentum, on people moving automatically, not paying attention. When the garage worker was finally arrested, investigators discovered he had committed crimes in multiple cities. Each time, he stayed just long enough to learn the environment, then moved on. He chose places where people were distracted, tired, and eager to leave. During interrogation, he admitted that he preferred transitional spaces, not homes, not crowded streets, places in between, places where people assumed they were still safe, but were already alone. True crime often reveals that danger doesn't always come from strangers in obvious places. Sometimes it waits in the spaces we don't linger in long enough to notice. The spaces we pass through every day. These stories are disturbing not just because of what happened, but because of how easily it all blended into routine. The perpetrators didn't break in. They didn't force entry. They were already allowed to be there. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep. based on real events and told calmly and without interruption. Sleep well tonight and stay aware. Hello and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to gently remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Certain names, locations, and identifying details have been changed, but the events themselves are drawn from documented investigations, witness statements, and court records. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, settle in. Let the world outside fade away. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every one. If you enjoy these true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins with a stretch of highway that locals avoided after dark. Not because it was dangerous in an obvious way, but because it felt wrong. The road cut through long miles of forest and farmland, with few lights and even fewer buildings. People used it every day, but at night, it became quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The first person disappeared after their car broke down along that road. A passing driver reported seeing the vehicle pulled onto the shoulder with its hazard lights on. By morning, the car was still there, but the driver was gone. Police assumed they had accepted a ride and left the area voluntarily. Weeks later, another car was found abandoned only a few miles away. Then another. Each time, the scene was the same. No signs of a struggle. Doors closed. Personal belongings still inside. The disappearances were spread out over months, and because the victims came from different towns, the cases weren't immediately connected. The pattern began to emerge when a tow truck operator mentioned something strange. He recalled seeing the same pickup truck parked nearby during 2 separate recoveries. The driver never approached. He just sat there with his headlights off, watching. Investigators began reviewing old traffic footage and found the pickup appearing again and again near the times vehicles were abandoned. It belonged to a man who lived less than 10 minutes from the highway. He worked as a roadside assistance contractor and frequently responded to breakdowns in that area. He had tools, a uniform, and a reason to stop. When questioned, he explained that he often pulled over to help stranded drivers. He said it was part of being a decent person. Many people remembered him. Some even described him as kind. A search of his property revealed something far more disturbing. Hidden behind a locked shed were personal items belonging to multiple missing people. Shoes, jackets, phones wrapped carefully in plastic. Each item was labeled with a date and a location. Investigators realized he didn't see the victims as people, but as moments in time. As police dug deeper, they uncovered reports that had been dismissed for years. Drivers who said a man had offered help but made them uncomfortable. People who noticed their cars were touched or moved when they returned from rest stops. Each report alone seemed minor. Together, they told a story of escalation. Another case tied into the investigation involved a woman who survived an encounter on that same highway. Her car overheated late at night. The pickup pulled over within minutes. The man offered to drive her to a gas station. Something in his tone made her hesitate. Instead, she pretended to call a friend and said help was already on the way. The man left immediately. She later learned how close she had come. In a separate but related discovery, police linked the suspect to a series of disappearances near rest areas across state lines. He traveled frequently for work. Each disappearance lined up with his schedule. He chose places where people were already vulnerable, already stressed, already eager to accept help. Perhaps the most unsettling detail came from his interview with investigators. He said he never forced anyone. He waited for them to trust him. He relied on exhaustion, isolation, and the belief that help is always safe. Another connected case uncovered during the investigation involved a man who worked overnight at a train station. He assisted travelers, answered questions, and helped carry luggage. Several passengers reported missing bags or delayed arrivals, but nothing serious, until a missing person case traced back to the station. Surveillance footage showed the employee guiding the victim into a restricted area under the guise of helping them. In both cases, the common thread was access paired with authority, a uniform, a role, a reason to be trusted. These crimes didn't happen in dark alleys or abandoned buildings. They happened in moments of vulnerability, on roadsides, in transit spaces, in the brief pauses between destinations. One investigator later described the danger as quiet and patient. It didn't chase. It waited. It depended on routine and assumption, on the idea that bad things happen somewhere else. True crime reminds us that safety isn't just about where we are, but how aware we remain. That listening to discomfort can matter more than politeness, and that help should never come at the cost of instinct. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, let me know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told calmly, slowly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware. Hello, and welcome back. Before we begin, I want to remind you that the story you're about to hear is based on real crimes involving real people. Some names, locations, and minor details have been changed to protect privacy, but the events themselves are drawn from documented investigations, court records, and witness accounts. This story is meant to be listened to slowly and quietly. If disturbing content affects you, it's okay to stop listening now. For everyone else, get comfortable. Let your breathing slow and your body relax. And as you listen, tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoy true crime stories for sleep, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future uploads. This story begins in a quiet suburban town, the kind of place where neighbors leave their doors unlocked and people wave to strangers without thinking. At first, it seemed like a perfect place to settle down. But beneath the surface, a quiet predator had been watching for years, unnoticed by everyone around him. The first victims were elderly residents living alone. They were considered private, independent, and safe. When one went missing, neighbors assumed they had gone to visit relatives or had been hospitalized. Weeks later, another elderly resident disappeared under similar circumstances. The pattern went unnoticed because the disappearances were far apart and involved people who lived solitary lives. It wasn't until a young woman reported a strange encounter that authorities began to connect the dots. She had been walking her dog at night when a man appeared from the shadows. He smiled, waving as if he belonged there. She felt a chill run down her spine and quickly walked home, locking the door behind her. The description she gave matched several reports that had been filed quietly over the years. Investigators discovered that the man had been living a double life. By day, he worked at a local hardware store and volunteered at community events. By night, he tracked residents' routines, noting who left for work, who went shopping, and who was home alone. He had detailed notebooks filled with observations, phone numbers, addresses, and even diagrams of homes and surrounding streets. When authorities searched his home, they found evidence of long-term planning. Items belonging to multiple victims were carefully stored. Personal identification, clothing, and photographs, each labeled with dates and locations. What made the case chilling was not just the crimes themselves, but the patience and precision with which they were carried out. He had no impulsive tendencies. He waited, observed, and struck only when the opportunity was safest for him. Another layer to the investigation revealed that he had installed hidden cameras and listening devices in homes he had entered. Some victims were monitored for weeks before any harm came to them. Investigators concluded that he enjoyed the control and fear itself, not simply the possession of belongings or other material things. A related case surfaced in a nearby town, where a college student reported being followed home after classes. She noticed the same car parked on multiple streets, the same figure appearing in alleys and near crosswalks. She reported it to campus security, and officers traced the vehicle back to the same man. It became clear that he didn't limit himself to one neighborhood. He moved quietly from place to place, choosing victims whose routines he could predict and who were least likely to raise alarm quickly. During his trial, the psychological evaluation revealed a chilling insight. He did not see his victims as people. He saw them as objects, as moving pieces in a game he controlled. What made him most dangerous was his ability to blend in, to appear normal, and to exploit the assumptions of trust that communities naturally extend to familiar faces. This case is a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it helps. Sometimes it lives quietly next door, attending the same events, waving politely, waiting for moments of opportunity. True crime often teaches us to trust our instincts, to pay attention to subtle signs, and to understand that routine and familiarity can sometimes be exploited. Awareness, vigilance, and intuition are our strongest protections. Thank you for listening. If you're still here, tell me where you're watching from tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories for sleep, based on real events and told calmly, slowly, and without interruption. Sleep well tonight, and stay aware.